Hello and welcome. The goal of this podcast is to get listeners connected with others in the sports industry because they say it's all about who you know, and now you know us. All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to the Constant Sports Podcast. We have a cool, exciting guest today in the sports tech kind of strategy business side of sports. That's Mark Wysocki. Thanks for joining us today, Mark.
Awesome, Connor. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, no problem. And then a little background on Mark here. Currently, he's a senior consultant stretched for strategic partnerships at Stack Sports, and we'll dive into that and what that is entirely here shortly. But just to kind of kick it off, Mark, why don't you go ahead and kind of talk about a little bit about your business, your background in business side of sports, and kind of what you drew you to the sector.
Sure, yeah. Well, again, appreciate it. Yeah, my current role at Stack Sports help manage a lot of our national governing body partnerships on the technology side of things. And oftentimes when we're looking at technology, it's a little bit more with the software side of things versus the hardware. So think youth sports registration systems, think referee management, tournament management, uniforms, and so on. Yeah, a big piece of my role is working with some of those national governing bodies to make sure that they're feeling good and organized from a technology standpoint at the broader level that then can filter down to a lot of the clubs, organizations, and what have you that fall under their umbrella in a sense.
Right.
Yeah, that's a lot of my current role. And obviously, don't want to date myself, but looking backwards, spent probably half a decade or more as kind of an executive in the youth sports side. So working, with a lot of youth soccer organizations in their front office to help manage an organization. So kind of the other side of the table here, and then
Mhm.
even further back in a past life was deep in kind of the sports business agency side,
Yeah.
and so working in a lot of the PR, marketing, public affairs side of things to help guide strategic direction in those roles, um, and yeah, and maybe kind of what spurred my energy towards the sports space in
Yeah.
general is just grew up as an athlete. So played a
Right.
lot of soccer growing up in the competitive space and collegiately and beyond. I think always wanted to stay connected to the
Yeah.
space. And so obviously I've had a few different roles to do that, which I've been fortunate to, knowing that, as you know, and hence this podcast, right? It's a space that a lot of people want to work in, and there's a lot
Mhm.
of different lanes and routes that you could go. Again, kind of fortunate for my journey here.
Yeah, awesome. Great to hear. And that's kind of a perfect segue into one of kind of the next topics I was interested in. And as you just alluded to with, sports, I feel like when people are first getting into sports, it's like I want to work for, I want to be the GM of Chicago Bears or whatever it is, like these executive level roles. And there's a lot of, trickle down kind of sports, teams or leagues or, like for example, sports tech companies that are still adjacent to sports teams and whatnot. But regarding the youth space specifically, you spent time with it's the Alexandria Soccer Association and that thing. And so maybe just talk a little bit about the, I guess, the youth model, amateur sports organizations for those who may not be familiar with, oh, like I could go down that path as a career and maybe some of your roles there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and maybe, initially to your broader note, right?
Mhm.
Like, someone who's coming up looking to work in the sports space, it's
Mhm.
easy to see your NFL or professional level
Yeah.
teams and say, like I got to be in the front office there and
Uh,
doing X, Y, and Z. Um, there's certainly routes to do that from, starting maybe at an internship level or volunteering or what have you. But to your note, there's, the sports business space is a massive, massive industry, and there's many layers to it that all have viable career routes.
mhm.
And again, kind of fortunate in my journey to have kind of put myself in a few different lanes to kind of see maybe what made the most sense in a certain phase of my life, or what maybe narrowed my direction over time to kind of get to where I'm at. So thought I'd preface with that.
Yeah,
But
no, great. Yeah.
but prior to my current role, yeah, spent a good deal of time in the youth sports space, as a as an executive, kind of running a youth soccer academy in Alexandria Soccer and Player Progression Academy, sitting on the executive teams there. And
Mhm.
ultimately, they're organizations that were run as a business in a sense, right? And so sometimes when you're thinking of the youth sports space, which there are many organizations that kind of fall in this category in that they're maybe volunteer driven, maybe
Mhm.
less resources, less strategy behind the scenes, and literally the goal is to, okay, are people showing up? Do we have some teams built? Okay, great. Whereas, our, mindset when I was, helping, lead Alexandria and the Player Progression Academy was very much so as a business, right? And so we're looking at things strategically year over year. Ultimately the goal is, increasing player participation and making sure the experience is good. And a lot of times, in those roles, a lot of people, including myself, were previous athletes ourselves. And so we
Mhm.
kind of see it through the lens of like, man, what would have been nice if I could have led when I was playing and,
Perfect.
changes
Yep.
or things like that. And so we try to embrace, maybe some of those like experience type things, but ultimately they're businesses, right?
Mhm.
And so, from, you know, again, the revenue side and managing the operations and a lot of different inputs that mirror what you would think go into running a professional sports team or other kind of sports businesses. And so, yeah, a lot of inputs on the U side. Obviously, when you're thinking about, your core stakeholders, there's the immediate players, obviously, that you're looking to impact, but more often than not, you're interfacing with parents and maybe other businesses that have some kind of like, whether it's sponsors or things along those lines. And so, yeah, a lot of, I'll say, like transferable layers that, those youth sports academies served as businesses that map towards kind of, you name the maybe more well-known sports business
Yeah.
organization,
Bigger entities.
across the globe. So.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's great. And it's just kind of closing that. I thought it's just I mean, like we're saying, there's so many organizations and businesses within the kind of the lower tiers, you could say, whether it's youth or even minor leagues that are should be on kind of a high notice alert for those getting into this space because a lot of, like you said, a lot of transferable skills, a lot of behind the scenes, I've said this before on the show, but I worked for a minor league baseball team and I mean, we did everything under the sun. It was like, wearing 92 hats and doing all sorts of stuff. So yeah, those types of skills and learning those things and there's so many opportunities out there. So that's awesome to see. And then regarding kind of the, sports branding, kind of management insights as you did some freelance kind of consulting work as from your point of view, from your perspective when specifically related to the sports sector, obviously. What have you seen brands do that build strong brand identity, build strong brand awareness in the space?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think ultimately many organizations, whether it's like a club or a league or what have you, they
Mhm.
want to have kind of their own, and they need to like their own unique identifier, what from
Yep.
a branding standpoint, and not just talking about, the logo and the
Mhm.
name and what have you. That's obviously what a lot of people see, but in recent years, it's come down to more so kind of behind the scenes of like, what do you stand for? What is your identity? What are you telling people that your organization is all about? Who
Yeah.
is leading your organization? What are their values, right? And so
Mhm.
it's a lot more intricate now than maybe historically when you're just looking at the New York Yankees and the pinstripes and that's
Yep.
what they're about. And of course there's layers of this that existed back then, but it's come to the forefront now, where there's a lot more intricacy and especially now in the digital world, right, where you can highlight some of these things, you can highlight the people and the players and what have you. And so yeah, in some of my, consulting work, that was my aim, right? Is
Mhm.
like, okay, is there a good foundation in place that we can build around, which
Yep.
is kind of, historically what has been the focus. But then from there is, what's the story? What can
Mhm.
we talk about? Who can we highlight? What can we highlight? It's not just about, wins and losses. There's a lot more in between that people want to see. And because of that, like the end goal is to try to map that brand identity towards getting fans in the stands or eyeballs on what you're, talking about, registration, whatever it is, ticket sales. And so, certainly want to have kind of a strategic plan in place of why you're establishing your
Mhm.
brand and your identity. But yeah, it's cool now, right? Where there's so many more intricacies to it that, marketers just have the ability to get really creative.
Take off and run. Yeah, right, right. And leading into that with kind of the sports tech space, a little bit what you're doing with Stack Sports, but is that kind of what led you to Stack? I mean, obviously the opportunity came about, but was it kind of the tech side, the newness of it? You've been working in sports organizations, but what kind of led you there?
Yeah, good question. I think ultimately, in previous roles, I've worked with a lot of sports tech as a user, as an executive,
Yeah.
as maybe wearing different hats, and so
Hmm.
have had a lens towards some of these tools on the software side, some of the hardware side as well, that have provided value and made lives easier. And so have always been kind of drawn to the impact that that layer those companies can provide. And so yeah, a unique opportunity came up, had some conversations, and landed myself in a nice role here to help not just execute, but build and evaluate the strategy of why we're doing things and what we're doing and so on. And so I think, at Stack Sports, the organization really prides itself. We pride ourselves on the ecosystem that we've
Hmm.
built in that, a lot of conversations that we have. The goal is to be able to say, yes, we can help you with that,
I see.
whether we have built it, whether maybe we've acquired it, or maybe we have a strategic partnership and that we can help you connect the dots.
Hmm.
And so that piece I think has been really cool for me. And that, like I said, as I was growing up as an athlete, and maybe with my parents' lens a little bit, right, in that they're kind of managing the admin side of me
Yeah.
playing, ways to make that easier, less barriers, less friction, and just a better overall experience.
Hmm.
And so it's cool in my role, obviously working with all the national governing bodies, but even filtered down, when I'm having conversations with administrators at specific clubs, they're like,
Yep.
wow, like that's helping. That's making their lives easier. Their parents are happy. Kids are having a good time. So there's some cool, I guess, full circle layers built in here too.
Yeah, it is a lifelong story coming to a full circle there at the end. But that is interesting to hear. And then maybe just talking a little bit about kind of different communication skills or styles when you're working with youth organizations or you're working with like you said administrators. Kind of talk a little bit about that and kind of what you've learned as in your current role.
Yeah, I mean, communication's important, just at the big
Base
scale of
level.
things.
Yeah.
And then, when you really layer that down into like your day to day, I mean, in my role and a lot of like how I've kind of prided myself over time is the
Mhm.
relationship building side and being able not just to like communicate with somebody and have a good conversation, but like truly, value the relationship and not just in a like short-term
Transactional. Yep.
transactional, yeah, kind of mindset. It's very much so like, of course, want to help you short term as much as possible, but like let's think big picture here and what does this truly look like over the next 6 months, year, decade,
Mhm.
and beyond, right? And so, when you're talking about that communication side of things, it's being able to effectively kind of empathize with somebody's scenario, wear their hat, kind of run in their shoes a bit. And just know that, if you can make their life easier in the next week or immediately or kind of self-serving, that's not necessarily the end goal. The end goal
Mhm.
is that you're, helping long term and even removed from the business side, right? Like
Mhm.
you've met a good contact that you can stay close with, whether it's over LinkedIn and celebrate kind of each other's wins over
Yeah.
time. And
Uh-huh.
so I think I've found that that approach has been fulfilling individually, but also, you see business results come as a part of that mindset. And so, not sure if that was the direction you're
Yeah,
aiming to go
no, yeah,
there,
no,
but
for sure. Yeah, no,
an important piece, yeah.
yeah, no, yeah, no doubt. And it leads well into kind of another talking point I want to talk on. And I feel like nowadays everyone is either talking about like, what books are people reading, what podcasts, etc., as far as, gaining skills and, working on those professionally, in that sector. But regarding kind of key skills in the sports business specifically, related space, are you a podcaster? You read books? Kind of what's your go-to?
Yeah, a little bit of both. I'd say with two kids under 3.5 right now. The book side is kind of faded a bit.
Yeah.
So can hit the podcasts in transit.
Yep.
But I'd say even just like obviously those resources are super helpful, but from an experience standpoint, like, and we kind of alluded to this, early on, is finding yourself in a role where you'll be able to wear multiple hats
Hmm.
at, if you're kind of more junior or mid-level role, is a great route in that you're just able to build that experience. You're able to
No
see things
question.
firsthand. You're able to have conversations and learn about how people talk about certain things, which ultimately, will set you up for success down the road. And so, I not to glance over the initial question surrounding, podcasts or books or
Yeah.
other resources, but that is invaluable.
Hmm.
I will say too, another layer that I found a lot of value of is looking at maybe other industries or adjacent industries that aren't necessarily like sports business focused,
Right.
right? Like things that are just like, think about like your Forbes or, Forbes Money or things
Yep.
like that that are more kind of general business or other industries and how they've been successful. Because I think there's a lot of transferable things that, sometimes people just think, well, I got to be in the sports business lane,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like that
Right.
doesn't make sense for and maybe some pieces don't, but there's a lot of things that kind of, I'd say that you can probably take over from one to the other or try to apply or test and
Uh,
learn. And so, anyways, all that to be said is I've found some value over time trying to think about different industries, how they've been successful, and then find ways that maybe I can test or apply that to how I operate in my lane.
right.
So
Yeah,
hopefully,
well said, and it kind of goes back to when you were, saying you were working with the Alexandria organization over there in the soccer. It's a business, and sports is a business, and you can look obviously at other businesses, right? Whether it's a real estate business, or I mean, there's different skills and things that come into play. Of, how you're going to generate revenue, how you're going to get eyeballs on things. I mean, it's all relatively the same game, at
yep,
the end of the day.
nope, 100%.
Is and it kind of regarding the networking side of it and relationship building, as you mentioned, we get a lot of questions from kind of aspiring sports professionals, whether it's should they be doing cold calls, LinkedIn, emails, kind of what's been your either go-to, or what have you seen people reach out to you the most on?
Yeah, no, I mean, um, I'd say the sports business industry is interesting in that it's while it's massive, it's also a smaller community than you
Mhm.
think, and most are, happy to help, right?
Yep.
And happy to have a conversation or happy to help connect the dots. And so, um, you know, have been fortunate over the years to make a lot of great contacts that, I stay close with and or we lean on each other for what do you think about this or this.
Mhm.
Some are just an acquaintance and see them annually at a conference or
Right.
whatever it is.
Right. Right.
So it's a small world, and ultimately, obviously, on my end, if anybody is interested in getting in touch, LinkedIn is usually a pretty good route. I think I've got my email on
Mhm.
LinkedIn as well, so if that's a preferred route, but pretty responsive and happy to help. And like I said, many in this space are happy to help, and so at least I hope.
Yeah. No. No.
In my experience, they have been.
Yeah,
So
likewise, likewise. And no, no, as you're saying, the sports industry is seems massive, kind of from the outside, but once you get in, you realize like, oh, okay, I know Mark and he works at X, Y, and Z, and then oh, he knows, Sharon, and it's, when it boils down to it, you're a few connections away from, knowing the right people. So that's
yeah,
always important as building that out in your career. And then just to kind of wrap up here in the next few minutes, but we're gonna hit you with some rapid fire questions, kind of some of your maybe looking back on your career a little bit, some of your favorite moments. So, some to start, maybe we'll do kind of your favorite partnership or your favorite event, something along that nature that you worked on in your time.
yeah, good question. I think it's cool in my current role at Stack, still being very connected to the soccer space. And
Hmm.
so being able to work with a lot of soccer organizations over the years, just knowing that I've played in the space and grew up and coached and executive level and what have you. And so not necessarily a partnership, but one layer that is really cool is recently and try to go to annually, but the U.S. Soccer Coaches Convention
Oh, okay.
in this last year was in Chicago. It changes locations every year, but you see a lot of familiar faces year over year. Everyone's kind of driving towards the same purpose or trying to live vicariously through their players and
Yeah.
administratively, looking to set things up for success. And so, again, not necessarily a partnership, but maybe a medium where a lot of partners we get to meet with and or create new ones in a sense. And so, yeah, that's probably where I'd start here.
Yeah, no, well said. Yeah, that's awesome. Good to hear. And then regarding advice or sayings or a quote or something, but best piece of advice that you've ever received or read or heard.
Uh, Another good one. Um, I mean, I think an obvious one is, always trying to take pride in what you're doing and
Hmm.
and making sure you're doing things the right way and not just checking
Hmm.
boxes. But beyond that, I think in today's world, it's kind of a layer of just being kind, right? And assume good intent and just be
Hmm.
positive in your interactions. And just handling everything with kindness. I think that maybe goes a little bit unsaid. And so I think maybe that's a good note.
Yeah, no, yep, well said. You said it perfectly. And then something related in the sports industry that you're looking forward to here in the near future, an innovation or a game or something that you got your eye on.
Good question. I know, there's been a lot of really cool innovations recently surrounding a lot of like broadcast streaming
Yeah.
technology and recording highlights and highlight videos and things like that. Obviously, you can maybe extrapolate this a little bit into like the NIL world a
Hmm.
little bit and some of those pieces. But I think that kind of broadcast streaming video world has come the furthest in such a
Oh yeah.
short period of time, in being able to, and just thinking, from like when I was a competitive player, like, my dad was out there with the VHS, like
Just listening
camcorder,
to
yeah,
yeah.
holding it over his shoulder, and now, there's obviously a ton of different competitors out there, but, your Veo cameras that you can just throw it up there, it's capturing the whole game, it's following the ball, it's cutting clips in real time. And then you can download that as a player after the fact and create
Oh
your
yeah.
highlight video all within 24 hours. I think that piece has been pretty cool, and it's been cool to see a lot of. Obviously, I've seen it and managed it from the soccer side, but even
Hmm.
across sports, seeing that piece of the puzzle kind of flourish, and even just remove from like the highlights and the cutting, but like the access side and being able to like all you need is a link, and now your grandparents across the country can watch,
Yeah.
um, and so I think it's been a very unique piece of innovation that's occurred over the last, 10 years really.
Oh
And
yeah. Very
um,
fast.
it's been a cool, and I'm sure it's not done, right?
Oh yeah.
It's growing quickly, both from an adoption standpoint, but just like what it can do.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, and I read today that the NFL, kind of on that note, that for the Super Bowl they're going to have 149 cameras in use, which to me seems like about 130 cameras over what you need. Like I don't know
Yeah.
how you need that many angles
Yeah,
to
it's
do a game, but that just kind of goes to show that the tech and the evolution, innovation for sports is, or just in general, is skyrocketed, and it's getting crazy out there.
oh yeah. No. Well, I guess they want to make sure that every touchdown is a touchdown kind
Yeah.
of thing.
They,
A
they
lot
don't
of
want they
eyeballs.
don't want to miss a play. Yeah, it's a big stage to mess up on. So they're crossing all their T's and dotting all their I's, and that's for sure.
Yep.
Um, the just wrapping up here, Mark. We appreciate you stopping by today and sharing your insights in the sports world and business and strategy and your personal journey. And we like to kind of give the guest the last say, kind of get you on your soapbox and close us out here. So let us feel free to kind of take it from here.
Cool. Well, I'd just say, again, appreciate the time and appreciate everyone, tuning in. Awesome to see, maybe just a quick shout to you, Connor, some of these platforms that exist on a podcast level or what have you that help highlight and encourage and motivate those in the industry that are, looking for a nod
Mhm.
or looking for someone to connect with, or maybe a route within the sports business space that they just hadn't thought of before. And so, yeah, my hope is that, my path maybe encourages someone to
Yep.
consider something within the lanes or adjacent, or maybe something that they didn't think of that, just generates some ideas. And so, yeah, hat tip to you here a little bit. And then, Yeah, beyond that, again, I know I noted it earlier, but happy to connect with anyone who is looking to discover more about myself, my journey, places I've
Mhm.
been, or just talk shop.
Yeah.
So more than happy.
Yeah, no, perfect. Well said. And then I can attest, obviously, that's how I reached out to you just on LinkedIn. Very quick response, and we got things, got in a phone call. So, yeah, like I said, LinkedIn is the best way to connect us for Mark. And we appreciate you coming on today, Mark. And, got a jam-packed schedule on your side of things. So we appreciate you sharing the time and sharing your stories. So for the listeners and viewers, make sure to check this out on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, anywhere to get your podcasts. And we'll see you guys next week.
Awesome. Thanks, Connor.